So I'm gonna go ahead and start it off officially with Nicole, and then we'll kind of get going. We wanted to wait till you had a little bit like dessert already in you, but we also want to make sure that you get back to work on time, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Nicole, go ahead, dear.
Thank you, Marianne, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to CHLI's Hispanic Consumer and Constituent Insights Forum. My name is Nicole Marin. I am CHLI's Director of Programs and Internships at the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute. The Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute, or CHLI, as we lovingly call it, is the premier organization founded by members of Congress to advance the Hispanic community's economic progress with a focus on social responsibility and global competitiveness. Founded in 2003, we are a 501c3 nonprofit and the only bicameral, bipartisan, Hispanic-led, and Hispanic-serving nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. CHLI is dedicated to fostering a broad awareness of the diversity of thought, heritage, interests, and views of Americans of Hispanic and Portuguese heritage. The CHLI Congressional Public Policy Hill Briefing Series provides a platform for an in-depth dialogue on current issues that affect U.S. Hispanic and Portuguese communities. These are conversations to educate and inform members of Congress, their staff, and Hispanic communities across the country. Today's program will discuss the Hispanic market imperative. This is a chance to dive into data and hear from experts as they walk us through critical research and educate us about America's fastest growing and most diverse consumer segment, the Hispanic community. Please take the time to listen to all the different perspectives shared today. And before we begin, I want to share a couple of housekeeping items before we get the program started. First, we ask you all to help us share the speakers' points of view as well as your own. So please be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. We are at the CHLI, again, that is the CHLI. And on LinkedIn, we are the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute. The discussions, including the Q&A portion, which we'll get into a little bit later in the program, are being live streamed through our YouTube channel at The CHLI, so you can always go back and watch it later if you wish, and also share it with others. Our guest speakers will share their presentations. These will be followed by a fireside chat, after which there will be time for Q&A. We will have two members of the CHLI team on each side of the room with a microphone, so whenever we're diving into Q&A, just raise your hand and a member of our team will come to you so that you can ask your question. We ask that you please limit your speaking time to just the question to allow for more people to be able to interact with our speakers. You'll notice on your tables as well that you have a QR code for one of our valued partners, Catch Skills. Catch Skills is a platform that helps people track and showcase their skills so they have a complete picture of their skill sets. Catch Skills turns everyday learning into skills that drive growth. Scan the QR code on your tables anytime during this program and it'll take you to their website, catchskills.com, where you can log into your account or create one today, and that specific QR code has a prepared prompt that will help you submit your very first skill tracking log. Now, I'd like to present our President and CEO, I'd like to introduce our President and CEO back to the podium, Marianne Gomez-Horta. CHLI's President and CEO is committed to the vision of advancing the Hispanic community's diversity of thought. She brings more than 2 decades of corporate leadership from Coors Brewing Company, McDonald's Corporation, and the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. Her expertise spans corporate strategy, public affairs, marketing, and community engagement, experience that she leverages to drive meaningful impact for CHLI's interns, our alumni, and stakeholders across the public and private sectors. She is a graduate of the prestigious Presidential Leadership Scholars Program, class of 2025, and Gomez-Horta has also been recognized with the Raíces Award by the Hispanic Lobbyist Association, or HLA by their acronym. This award was given to her for her commitment to advocacy and mentorship. She serves on the board of the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility and advisory councils for Global Americans and the American Latino Veterans Association. She also serves as a national advisor to Hispanas Organized for Political Equality, or HOPE. deeply committed to leadership. Marianne Gomez Horta has also shared her expertise as an educator at American University and the University of Phoenix. She earned a bachelor's in communications from the University of the Pacific and her MBA from St. Mary's College of California. And she has been honored with distinguished alumni awards from both institutions. Marianne is a proud daughter of Mexican immigrants from Michoacan, Mexico, and Brownsville, Texas, and was raised in California's Central Valley. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you, Nicole. And I also have to add, thank you for my husband for joining us today. He's also involved with the Latino program. Just by a show of hands, how many are Hill staffers? Okay, how many are you with nonprofits? All right, how many are in corporate? The corporate, that's got to be small. Okay, how about other positions in federal service here in Washington? If you're not on the Hill, okay, a few more, okay, good. Well, good, this is exactly where you need to be today. Because you are all going to get some great information from the speakers. So thank you again for joining us. And on behalf of the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute, thank you for joining us today on this important conversation on the Hispanic consumer and the Hispanic constituent. At CHLI, we believe progress begins when leaders come together, just like all of you are doing here today, to share ideas, challenge what they know, and learn from one another. So hopefully wherever you're sitting today, you're making new friends, like I tell our interns. During today's program, you will hear key insights and research that will help us better understand the Hispanic community, both from a Hispanic consumer standpoint and also as voters. You will hear how data can strengthen communication, inform decision-making, and build stronger relationships with communities that we serve. Our goal today is to start and continue conversations long after the program ends today. So I'm going to jump ahead here and recognize a few people in the room before I pass it on to our chairwoman. First, I'm going to start on this side of the room so I don't forget somebody. Jonathan Hallion is on our advisory council. Jonathan Hallion. I always call him Mr. Hallion. And then Ruben Morales in the back with Wells Fargo. He's also on our advisory council. I'm going to skip our presenters. The newest board member to join us, Bernadette Carrillo with Televisa Univision, heading up the office. And then our chairwoman, who I'll have the honor to introduce briefly. I also want to take the time to thank our two main sponsors for today, Hallion and Airbnb. Thank you again for your support. We could not have had the sold-out room with a great lunch and great floral arrangements without you. So thank you. And none of this happens without a team, so I'm gonna go through the names really quickly because I've learned if I don't thank you in the beginning, sometimes I just say goodbye and then I forget. So Nicole, who you already heard from, Bruce, Josh, Wari, Adriana, Andres, Maite, Angela, Tia, Mercy, Molly, Bella, Alex, and Sophia. Thank you all. I also want to recognize a special group, and if I don't know you, but you belong to this special group, I want you to also raise your hand. Raise your hand if you are a CHLI intern or an intern on the Hill or an intern in DC this summer. Raise your hand if you're an intern. All right. All right. I know this is going to be the best meal of the day. Right? Okay. All right. So next is going to have the honor here of introducing our chairwoman. The Honorable Ileana Ross-Layton is the first Latina elected to the United States Congress. Wow. She served from 1989 to 2019, including as chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Born in Havana, Cuba, Chairwoman Ross-Layton built a remarkable legacy of leadership in foreign policy, Hispanic representation, and advancing opportunities for women in public service. Today, she continues her work as Senior Policy Director at the international law firm Aiken. In 2003, alongside CHLI Vice Chairman Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart and the late Honorable Lincoln Diaz-Balart, they started CHLI with a vision focusing on advancing the Hispanic community's diversity of thought. More than 2 decades later, that vision continues to create opportunities for young people across the country. And all of us here are gathered as part of that legacy. So please join me in a round of applause for the Honorable Ileana Ross.
Gracias, Marianne.
And that was a good lunch too.
That was yummy.
Yeah.
Oh my. I'm not used to eating healthy food. When she said salmon, I go, oh no, something greasy, give me, but it was delicious. Muy buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
What a delight it is to be here with all of you. Thank you so very much for coming to this wonderful Chile event, Hispanic Consumer and Constituent Insights Forum. It's always a pleasure for me to see many wonderful young faces. I love it. You are the future of our country. And leaders from Congress, from business, from academia, and the nonprofit sectors. You'll always have a home in Chile. Today's forum focuses on understanding the trends that are shaping Hispanic consumers and constituents. Our community, as all of you know, is one of the fastest growing and one of the most dynamic populations in our country. It is diverse in its experiences, in our priorities, and in our perspectives. Understanding those differences matters, not only for businesses seeking to do better, to improve their market share, to expand their product line throughout the United States, and to better serve their consumers, but also it's important for policymakers who represent their constituents to understand that we're not all alike, that there are subtle differences and important differences. And those insights can lead to stronger policies. It can lead to better communication and ultimately to informed decisions across every sector. At Chile, we believe the best ideas come from bringing everyone together. So I thank you, all of you who are here present to hear our wonderful speakers. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our partners. Thank you to all of you for being here and those who are watching at home in the comfort of their pajamas and slippers. I'm envious. I put a little lipstick on, that's all the effort I give to these events. But I love coming to Chile events. I'm so proud to be the chair. As you know, Chile was founded by our wonderful mentor, y mi hermano legislativo, Lincoln Diaz-Balart, whom we miss every day. So Lincoln, Mario, and I, way back when, before most of you were even born, we founded this great organization, and it just keeps getting bigger and better because of the fine quality of folks that we're able to entice into coming, and the salmon is a pretty good enticement as well. But now it is my pleasure, es un honor, to introduce our next speaker, who represents one of today's valued sponsors. Kathleen Beatty is the Senior Vice President of the U.S. Corporate Affairs at Haleon, and she's my seatmate. Thank you so much, Kathleen. She leads the company's efforts to connect their work with the communities they serve. And they serve each and every one of you. Have you heard the products that they represent? All of you have come in contact with these products. We're grateful for their continued support of Chile, their commitment to conversations that help us understand and serve our Hispanic consumers and constituents. So please help me in giving a warm Chile welcome to Kathleen. Come on over. Yeah, go get them.
Not a very Hispanic name, I will say. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your very kind words this morning and for your leadership. At Haleon, we value our relationship with Chile and appreciate the opportunity to support conversations that bring different perspectives to the table. You may not know who Haleon is, but I'm sure many of you know our brands: Advil, Lonase, Tums, Sensodyne, Centrum for the youngers in the group, Emergency. I could go on.
I told you you would know their products.
products that 1 million people rely on to manage everyday health needs. And we proudly manufacture those products here in the United States. From New York to Puerto Rico, our supply chain helped keep these products accessible and affordable. That affordability matters. Research shows that every dollar spent on over-the-counter products generates $7 in savings for the healthcare system. These products help people address common health needs earlier, reduce unnecessary costs, and ease pressure on social safety net programs. But affordability is only part of that story. Consumer expectations are changing quickly, including how people choose products, who they trust, and what makes them loyal to a brand. For those of you working in a congressional office, these trends are connected to larger questions about access, cost, and the everyday healthcare experience of your constituents. One of the clearest examples in the Hispanic and Latino market this is not a niche audience. Hispanic consumers in the United States have an estimated $2.4 trillion in buying power today, and they are projected to make up more than a quarter of the US population by 2060. So for businesses, earning trust means more than reaching a diverse audience. It means understanding one of the most important engines of consumer growth in the country. That is why we're proud to join you today and to sponsor conversations around two key questions. One, what current trends tell us about consumer behavior? And two, how these insights can help build stronger brand recognition and loyalty. At Haleon, we put the consumer first, always. With a deep understanding of what people expect from their healthcare products, affordability, reliability, transparency, and trust. We cannot meet them where they are or earn their loyalty over time. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And with that, I turn it back to Nicole to introduce panelists.
Thank you, Kathleen, and to Haleon for making today's program possible. Now, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Ana Valdez, who is the President and CEO of the Latino Donor Collaborative. She is an American marketing, media, research, and political expert and thought leader with 30 years of experience in business, media, and the corporate sector. She was born and raised in Mexico City. She has studied and worked in Mexico, Europe, and the US. Valdez began her career at Nielsen, where she developed the company's largest market research client base. She then worked for Banamex, now you may know it more as Citibank, attracting multi-billion-dollar foreign investors and helping them identify the best business opportunities in the country. Since then, Ana has worked at the United Nations in Geneva, the Clinton administration in Washington, D.C., and has collaborated with companies such as Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Procter & Gamble, PepsiCo, Morgan Stanley, McDonald's, among others. Welcome, Ana.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thanks to everybody. The words that have been said here are so important. Thanks, Marianne, for inviting me and for organizing these events are so important. The points that the Congresswoman and of course, you know, Kathleen and Jonathan that I had an opportunity to talk with right now are so important. And that's what I'm doing here, and I am so excited because the audience is exactly the audience of what we do, which is create and produce and expand the information about the economic impact of Latinos. So this is the presentation today. I'm gonna set my timer because I tell you I start and then you can't stop me. So stop me if you need. But I'm gonna start by telling you a little bit of what we do. We are a think tank. We're a nonprofit think tank that produces data that, by the way, is available everywhere on our website. You can go to our website and download all these numbers anytime you want. Use them to create a change in what you're doing. Use them to empower yourself, because sometimes when you hear the news, or when you hear stereotypes, or when you confront people that really don't have an idea of who Latinos are, this information not only makes you feel good, but it also gives you tools, and it gives you all kinds of data to show that our presence in this country not only has been here even before this was a country, hence the states of Arizona and Nevada and California, and I can go on and on and on and on with our states, because we were here even before. So we belong here, and we not only belong here, we bring tremendous growth to this country. So I'm going to start first with, again, as I said, we're very unique. We're a nonprofit, but we're not a social justice nonprofit. We're actually, I always joke that we're bearer of good news. We understand that we want to be hopeful. We understand that we want to talk about all those people that are like the people that are here, right? We're not the stereotyping. We're not the people that are in, usually portrayed in Narcos and, all this horrible, fun and entertaining shows, but, not very truthful. And they are truthful for a very, very, very small piece of our population. So, so that's our uniqueness. We are not really a social justice organization, but more of a consulting organization. And so who are Latinos? I'm going to start by telling you that Latinos, again, are not a small little piece of the minority of all these titles that are kind of sometimes, in my opinion, diminishing. And maybe it is because I actually was born and raised in a country where everybody was Latino, and so I was never felt bad that I was Latina. So I come to this country, I see this community, it's so powerful. I actually started, I was lucky to land in this country working for the Clinton administration, and I was really fascinating and literally drooling with who the Latino community was. And so it was really hard for me to conciliate this to like the impression and the perception and the reality of who we were, because it was so far apart. And so part of the Latino Donor Collaborative is that mission of kind of eliminate that difference between who we are and what people perceive we are. And I think we're doing it. We see now there's been tremendous advances, but we still need to work more on it. So why do I say that we are the new mainstream in this country? If you see that graphic, and it's a little bit, I hope you can see it, but if you see, that's the population of Latinos by age. And I'm just going to go to the bottom of it. 27% of all the population in this country that is less than 18 years old is Latino. So somebody was saying, this is not a niche. This is actually a cohort that you cannot miss. If you're a company like the wonderful sponsors that we have today, if you are an elected official like our wonderful chairwoman, if you are a student, if you are anybody, if you're running for office, you need to understand this cohort, because 27% of all youth actually is Latino. And then 25% of the total population. So that's really important, and that's the bottom line of this graphic. This is another very surprising piece of data. So people think that all of us, and I am an immigrant, but they think that all of us are immigrants. And the truth is, that's not true, especially with youth. Well, let's start with 89% of all Latinos are here in the United States legally. 89%, and that's not only youth. 89% of all Latinos are here legally. 81% are citizens, 81%. And 8% are here with permits that allow them to work. So this is another big misconception, right, of who we are. And that, I hope that you guys are shaping a photo of our community, so that by the end of this presentation and the end of this event, because of course our second presenter is also brilliant about this data, but so that you really leave this room knowing who Latinos are, so that you can actually plan. Because if you continue thinking that, all Latinos are immigrants, and all Latinos are poor, and many Latinos are criminals, then you will never be able to take advantage of the opportunity that Latinos are bringing to the country. Kathleen was saying, you cannot afford to ignore it. It's true, you cannot afford to ignore it. And if I had more time, I would actually go through examples that we have and that we work with, right? On how people that have chosen to ignore it have not done really well, and how people that have actually chosen to get immersed in who are Latinos have really become the #1 brands and the #1 candidates and the #1 people in everything that they do. So next, this is another number that is crazy, because do you remember I said 27% of all the young people in this country are Latinos? Well, 94% of them were born here. So that wave of immigration when I came here, which happened from the 70s all the way to 2007, I was one of them. We had kids, and our kids were born here. So 94% of all those kids that are 27% of all young people are born here. So imagine when people say, oh, let's cater to them, let's bring a sombrero so they come. 94%, and these kids, right, are like, why would I go if they give me a sombrero? I mean, I'm American. And of course, I'm proud of where I come from, and I love, in my case, for example, Mexican things. And of course, every one of you do. But that's not what attracts us to a brand or to a candidate or to a policy, right? It's American issues that we care for, and of course, we have a background and it affects our decision making, but we're American. So that for me, this number for me is really incredible. I'm gonna talk today about a report that we're releasing tomorrow. We're lucky that because we bring tools and because we spread the word, to everybody, we're welcoming a lot of great venues that are mainstream decision-making kind of, sources. So tomorrow, if you can, tune in to Squawk Box on CNBC because our chairman will be releasing this report. You have a premise, don't talk to press with these numbers because they're not out yet. But we're gonna release our Latino Economic Impact Report of 2026. We've been doing this report for 9 years. So, but every year we come up with, numbers like the Latino GDP and the Latino Consumer Index and the Latino Income Index and all these different numbers that show how we not only, because that's another thing, right? Trends matter. So not only are we important in that year, we're important because we continue growing and the trend seems to be much faster than any other cohort. So, so tomorrow you'll see this report live on CNBC and then you'll start seeing it in other venues. But so what are we gonna say? Okay, so first of all, exactly as Kathleen was saying, and she had the number from last year because this one is not out, but it grew to $2.8 trillion. This is the consumption number of Latinos. And with this number, for me, this is what's crazy. So we are 69, I think, Mark, I think we're 69 million people today. And we are the third, if we were an economy, if US Latinos in the United States were an economy by themselves, we would be the third largest consumer market in the world. I mean, imagine the power that gives us, right? And what I'm telling you, I'm telling you about, okay, I won't skip to the next topic, but this would be, so we consume more as Latinos in the US than the whole country of Germany, or the country of Japan, or the country of UK. So when people say, oh, Latinos are an afterthought, or when they put us together in a group of non-white or people of color, they're missing this because this is a very specific group that is growing incredibly fast. So, so that's the first one, right? Now, the consumption part is, God, I have to hurry up. Sorry, I'll go, if I can, I go back here. But the US Latino income, that's another thing. Remember those kids I told you, I came here as an immigrant, right? And of course, I got married, and my husband is here. He's, by the way, hello. We got married, and we had kids that are American that were born here. Well, those kids are going to college. They actually just graduated in my case. But all those kids just went to college, are going to college. If there's for those of you that have parents that are immigrants, if there's a premise that rules your parents' world is, I'm gonna leave you a better, more prepared human being And for that, you need to go to school. And so Latinos are graduating, and therefore their income is growing extremely fast. Every time a Latino incorporates into the 18-year-old, workforce, student, whatever you choose to do, the average income goes up because we Latinos are bringing it up. Why? Because we're part of that wave, right? So Latinos are growing really fast in income. And then this is an incredible number always for me because this is the Latino GDP. So that's the growth. For those of you that are economists, the GDP is really what talks about the value of a community, right? Specifically in the United States, which is mostly, the GDP in the United States is mostly made by consumption. The GDP is really important. And when you say 4.4 trillion, it's like too big for me. Like I really don't know how to dimension it. So what we do is we dimension it by telling you what number of GDP in the world that would be. And I'm gonna go faster here. Okay, so if Latinos were an economy by themselves, they would have the GDP that would be the 4th largest in the world. What does that mean? So only the United States total, of course, right? The United States total, China and India, China, Germany would be bigger than our economy. Going back to what Kathleen was saying, this can't be a niche. This has to be some important strategy. My boss always, the chairman of the board, he was the CEO of 3 of the largest telecom companies in the world. And he says, any CEO that doesn't know these numbers should be fired. Because imagine if you had a business, you're an investor, and your CEO doesn't know almost 30% of the community, but more importantly, the one that is growing fastest. This is important to know because we are growing, and if on growth, out of those 10 economies, top 10 economies in the world, we're the fastest growing. We're growing in number, but not in demographics, right? Guys, we're growing in dollars. And in percentage, we're growing the fastest of the 10 economies. More than China, more than India, the fastest of the 10 economies. I think I'm heading towards the end, but we have these numbers by state, and of course, you expect Texas, California, Florida, Illinois, of course, New York, right, to be growing a lot, and it is growing a lot in numbers, but in percentage, the biggest growths come in states like South Dakota and North Dakota and Kentucky and Louisiana because we're coming everywhere. I'm gonna probably close because I am running out of time with an example that about 2 or 3 years ago, the governor of Wisconsin invited me to speak at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And I was really, really excited and very honored. I spoke, it went well. And when we sat for dinner, I asked him, I love that I'm here, but tell me why. And he said, you would be surprised of how many Latinos are coming into the state, migrating from other states, not immigrants, migrating from other states with knowledge, with credit, with savings, with entrepreneurs. And they're opening and really revitalizing a lot of our towns. And the example that was clear for me, he said, was that suddenly my daughter's best friend was a Latina. And of course, the family started inviting us to the barbecues and everything on Sundays. And we realized that we didn't know these people. And my wife and I decided we need to know who they are and how they act and what's moving them and what their values are and all that. So I decided to transmit this to the people in the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And that's what we do. And that's what and when, again, sorry that I'm citing Kathleen so much, but when Kathleen was talking about brands, we work with brands. We work with universities. We work with consulting firms like Bain and BCG and McKinsey and all these different groups that help us to not only get these numbers, but transmit them to the world so that everybody knows it. Because what we want is for every American to grow with them. We're not a social justice organization that just wants to get, and when they are needed, believe me, I'm not saying that they're wrong. They are so needed. But we want everybody to grow with our opportunities. We want everybody to grow with our community. We, intermarry. We have friends from every, realm of the society. And please help us to spread the word and go to our website, latinodonorcollaborative.org, and we'll be open for questions in a little bit. Thank you.
this means about our communities and hearing more about your research when we pivot to the fireside chat later. Now to introduce our next presenter, Dr. Mark Hugo Lopez is a Director of Race and Ethnicity Research at the Pew Research Center, where he leads planning on the center's research agenda focused on chronicling the diverse and ever-changing racial and ethnic landscape of the United States. Before joining Pew, he was a research assistant professor at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy and served as research director of the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, also known as CIRCLE. He is the author and co-author of numerous publications on the Hispanic electorate, immigration, and demographic trends. He earned his doctorate in economics from Princeton University and frequently shares his expertise in national and international media. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mark Hugo Lopez.
Presentation? Yes. Okay, well, while we're waiting for that, first, I want to say thank you very much, Marianne, for the opportunity to be here, to CHLI for the opportunity to be here. It's great to see everybody, although I'm a little worried I scared some people away. But I look forward to our conversation as well. I wanted to share with you some data that we've been collecting at the Pew Research Center, both demographic data, but also some public opinion data about where Latinos see themselves in the country today. I want to talk a little about the upcoming election as well, because as you know, there's a lot of interest in Latinos and how Latinos are going to potentially shape this election and future elections. So let's talk about how Latinos see their place in the country. But actually, before I do that, I want to say who we are at the Pew Research Center. The Pew Research Center is based here in Washington. We're a nonpartisan and non-advocacy organization. We don't take any positions on policy, so you won't hear me make recommendations. What we are doing is capturing public opinion, capturing trends, and simply documenting those to share with the public. So we have no position on policy. You might ask me a question, Mark, what should we do? I'll say, our survey shows, as a pivot in order to, well, not make any recommendations, as I said. So let's talk about some things. First, the data that we've been seeing from Latinos has continued to highlight a sense of things are not going as well as things could. A lot of that has to do with economic situation. Inflation has been rising. Many Latino families have expressed concern about the ways in which that is impacting their families. And we see that in our data of Latinos. This chart here, and I apologize, it looks like this might be from the PDF as opposed from my PowerPoint, but so my animations are not present. But you'll see here that on the right-hand side, when we asked this question recently, we found that about 2/3 of Latino adults told us that things have gotten worse for U.S. Hispanics in the year prior to our survey. This is the highest number we've ever seen in terms of capturing this for Latinos. It's higher than what we saw during the Great Recession, and the chart on the left shows you what we had seen prior with a telephone series of surveys. The point being here that Latinos feel downbeat about the situation of the group in the United States today. Now I want to say, this is not unique to Latinos. This is happening with many other groups of Americans as well. There's a general sense among many Americans, and particularly when it comes to economics, that things are more difficult than they had been. And as you know, this is a story that's been around not only during the current Trump administration, but it also was happening during the Biden years and the post-COVID years. So the general U.S. public and Latinos are no different, are expressing a certain sense of downbeatness when it comes to their situation. Also, when we ask Latinos whether or not their identity is important to how they see themselves, well, first, many Latinos tell us that their identity is extremely important to their Hispanic identity is extremely important to how they see themselves. The majority, about 2/3, say that it's at least very or extremely important. But we've also found in the same survey that many Latinos tell us that their Hispanic identity actually hurts them more than helps them get ahead in America today. I brought my wrong glasses, so I can't quite see the numbers, but I'm going to leave you all to read the numbers there. But from what I have found, about 1/3 of Latinos tells us that their identity hurts their opportunities to get ahead in America today. A slightly larger share say that their identity helps them get ahead, and about 40% say it neither helps nor hurts. So again, when we talk about Latinos and how they're seeing their situation, there's a significant part of the population that is feeling downbeat and negative about where things are. Apologies if this is so small, and of course I can't see it myself. So when we also ask about this, we also see that Democrats and Republicans have somewhat different perspectives on whether or not their identity is helping or hurting them get ahead today. You can see that, for example, among Latinos who identify with or lean towards the Republican Party, you'll see that many of them will say that it neither helps nor hurts. That's actually something they're more likely to say. But among Democrats, they're more likely to say that being Hispanic hurts their opportunities to get ahead in the country today. So there does appear to be a partisan split in how Latinos see the impact of their own identity on their chances of getting ahead in the country today. When it comes to identity overall, and I think this is an important part to highlight here, because this highlights and demonstrates the diversity of the nation's Latino population. And here you can see that when it comes to the labels that people use most often to describe themselves, you can see that, for example, about half of Latinos will say their country of origin term or their country of origin term with American, for example, Mexican or Mexican American, as a term they most often use to describe themselves. They'll use all of these terms at some point in their lives, but that's the one they use most often. Some are more likely to use American, some are more likely to use a pan-ethnic term like Hispanic or Hispanic American to describe themselves. But look at how it differs by whether or not somebody is an immigrant, the US-born children of immigrant parents, or somebody whose family has been here for at least 3 or 4 generations. And you can see here that immigrants are more likely to use country of origin or ancestry terms to describe themselves most often. I don't think that's a surprise. But by that 3rd generation, you see a significant share identify or call themselves American most often rather than by their country of origin term. Now I want to stress that people use all these terms in their lives to describe themselves. So even those who are of this 3rd or higher generation are saying that they use the country of origin term of their families to describe themselves. I'm 3rd generation, for example. My parents were born here. I was born here. It's my grandparents who came to the United States. I use Mexican American to describe myself, but I also use American. So the story of 3rd generation Latinos most often use American, but they're using all these terms at some point in their lives to describe themselves. Nonetheless, this reflects a particular view of who they are. Now, I want to talk a little bit about issues today, because obviously we have an election coming up, and what are the most important issues that Latinos see as problems, say, facing the country? Now here, you can see that, and again, I can't quite see it myself, so sorry if you can't read the numbers, but you can see here that for many Latinos, issues like the economy remain top issues, and I've highlighted what those are. Illegal immigration is also an issue, and people say this is a very big problem facing the country, but as you can see, in many ways, Latinos look like the general public on top issues, and in some ways are slightly different on issues. Look at climate change. If you look at climate change, that's one of those issues that Latinos are more likely to say is a very big problem than other Americans. And yet on some issues like illegal immigration, while many Latinos say that's a very big problem facing the country today, it's not much different than what you see from other groups of Americans necessarily, not all, but some. And so here, in terms of the issues list for 2026, the economy remains an important, if not the top issue for Latinos. We've also found in our surveys that many Latinos have struggled to make ends meet. So the Latino economy is growing, no doubt about that. Latinos are contributing more than ever to the US economy, but many are also finding that it's hard to make ends meet. They're having a difficult time when it comes to providing food, the cost of transportation is rising. All these are things that we've seen Latinos tell us that they've had to address recently as the US economy, particularly around inflation, has been a challenge. Also, when it comes to other issues like immigration, we've seen a growing share of Latinos tell us they're worried that they themselves or somebody they know might be deported, and you can see how that number has grown since the beginning of 2025. And many Latinos also tell us that they are concerned that they might be asked to show their papers at some point to prove their US citizenship. So this is also something that's on the minds of many Latinos in our surveys. Now I want to talk a little bit about politics because we have an election coming up. So let's talk about some data and some numbers around that. First, in terms of job approval ratings, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but the approval rating among Latinos for the president's job performance, so President Trump's job performance, that number has been declining. It's been declining, though, particularly among Latinos who voted for Donald Trump in 2024. That's on the left side, the top line. And you can see that since the beginning of the administration, the share of Latinos who voted for Donald Trump in 2024, who say they approve of the president's job performance has fallen from the low 90s to about 67% in her most recent survey. Now I want to stress, yeah, that's a decline. It's a decline for all Americans. In fact, you can see it on the right-hand side, the decline among all Americans in the president's approval rating. But what's interesting here is that still a majority, 2/3 of Latinos who voted for Trump in 2024, still approve of the president's job performance. The lines down at the bottom are the lines that you see for Latinos who did not vote in 2024 and Latinos who voted for Kamala Harris. You can see their approval ratings of the president are lower than they are among those who voted for Donald Trump, but it's important to note we've had a decline across all these groups, and in many ways, Latinos are like other Americans in how things are shifting in their views of the president. Also, we should note that the story about Latino voters, I want to stress, these are people who turned out to vote. So the people who turned out to vote are sometimes very different than people who might be eligible to vote, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you can see that across a couple of election cycles, Donald Trump made progress among Latinos who voted, Latino voters. So you'll see back in 2016 to 2020 to 2024, the share that Donald Trump won among Latino voters rose to almost 48%, or I'm sorry, almost 50% in 2024. That gain was not just about one place in the country. It was actually something that happened across the country. So yes, there's a lot of conversation about South Florida, about South Texas. But to be honest, we saw Trump make gains across all parts of the country, including in cities like New York, like the Bronx, and also in places like San Francisco and Los Angeles, among Latinos who voted in the election. And I think that's an important point to note. Many Latinos who voted in 2020 for Joe Biden did not vote in 2024. That's a pattern that we see not only among Latinos, but we see it among other Americans as well. Many Biden voters just didn't turn out to vote in 2024. So when we talk about voters and voting, an important part of the story is also turning out to vote. And Latinos have one of the lower voter turnout rates among Americans, generally speaking. About half of Latinos turn out to vote typically in a presidential election cycle. For white voters and black voters, those shares tend to be higher, tend to be about 67 to 70%, depending on the year and depending on the group. So Latino voters, many of whom are eligible, are not turning out to vote, and that could have impacts on what we see in terms of results for U.S. Latinos. All that said about the gains that Republicans have recently made, we've also noticed recently a shift in partisan identity. This chart shows you the share of Latinos who identify with or lean towards the two major political parties. The blue line is Democrats, the red line is Republicans. But what you can see here is you can see that there's been, since 25, an uptick in the share who identify with or lean towards the Democratic Party. That means more Latinos are identifying with or leaning as Democrats as opposed to what they were before, and Republicans may have lost a little bit of ground. Now, does this translate into an impact in terms of elections? That remains to be seen because it's a matter of who turns out to vote. We may see the stability. If you look at this looks pretty stable in terms of the shares that identify with as Republicans or as Democrats, but as you saw, we saw Donald Trump across 3 elections make significant progress among Latino voters in terms of winning their support. But again, it's among people who voted. Finally, I want to talk about a little bit of demographic context, and I apologize if I repeat some of what you have to say, but I think that putting this into context is really important. First, how big is the Latino population? I saw the banner outside, it says 65 million. Actually, it's over 68 million now, probably approaching 69. Wow. Did you know that 1 in 5 Americans are Latino? 1 in 5. Think about that. That's bigger than the nation's black population, that's bigger than the Asian population. And since 2000, about half of the US population growth has come from Latino population growth. So this is really an important demographic story. Another part of this is, as Anna was saying, the share who are immigrants has been changing. In fact, if you look at this chart here, you'll see there's been a decline until recently in the share of Latinos who are themselves immigrants. That's the chart on the left. And you can see here that fell to about 31%. Now we're back up a little bit. That's partly reflecting the arrival of many new immigrants after the COVID period. But the story here is that most Latinos are born in the United States. And when you take a look at those under 18, as Anna pointed out, that's over 90% who were born in the United States. So the story about immigration is one that's really interesting. Yes, this is one of the bigger immigrant populations in the country. In fact, as a little side note, did you know that between 1965 and today, about 72 million immigrants have come to the United States? 1965 is important because that's when there was a change in immigration law, the Immigration and Nationality Act. 72 million people, that's huge. Half of that came from Latin America, a quarter from Mexico alone. So Latin America and Latin American immigration has been important for reshaping the nation's demography, but interestingly, this population is now majority US born. The chart on the right shows you the share who have citizenship, the share who have a green card, the share who are here legally, but also it shows you the share who are what we call unauthorized or undocumented immigrants. As Ana was saying, most Latinos in the United States hold US citizenship. Now, when it comes to youth, I think an important part of the story here, as Ana was also saying, is that the younger you look at, the younger populations you look at in the United States, the greater the share Latinos make up. And you can see that here in this chart. I've broken it down by different age groups. What's important here is that Latinos are younger than other groups of Americans. The median age for the Latino population, 31.2 years. You can see it there for all the others. For example, for white Americans, it's 43.2. That's a big difference. Doesn't sound like it, but 10 years plus is a huge difference when it comes to demography and median ages. And you can just see it here. Latinos are a bigger share of younger populations, and in fact, those younger populations represent the demographic future of the country. That's where we're going to be in about 50 years, is you're going to see a country where Latinos are a bigger share of the US population. Also, young US-born Hispanics, 21.4 is the median age of US-born Hispanics. You can see how much younger it is in immigrant Hispanics. Why? Immigrants come to the US as work and as adults, and so they tend to be older when they arrive, but they have children here, and that's sort of some of the other differences that you will see. I want to get to this slide. Finally, when you talk about eligible voters, these are people who are at least 18 years of age and a US citizen. 38.2 million Latinos are going to be eligible in this coming election cycle this November. That's a huge number. Look at how fast that number has grown since the early 2000s. And not only that, when you take a look at this, you'll also see that, for example, 16% of all eligible voters are Latinos, bigger than the nation's black eligible voter population. Also, there was an additional 4.5 million people who became eligible to vote who are Latino since the last midterm election, since 2022. Most of that, 80% has come from young Latinos turning 18. About a million a year or so, did you know that? A million or so young Latinos born in the United States become adults every year. That has implications for the potential impact of Latino voters. And as you see, in recent elections, Latinos have become more important, and actually people follow, want to understand, and want to talk about Latino voters. To me, it's really striking how much has changed in the last 20 years. Latinos are one of the most important voter groups in recent election cycles, and I don't think this next year will be any different. But that is partly due to the power of Latino youth and the relative size of the nation's Latino electorate. I'm going to stop there. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lopez. Now, if we could have you here, Anna, our sponsor from Halion, our chairwoman, to join us in the front for a group picture before we continue with the rest of our program.
Panel. What we set up for the panel. Erica, please join us there. Hopefully they're not
Putting it up on the stage there,
Oh,
or if you
is that
would,
up there?
yeah.
We're too short, Michael, is that what you're saying?
No, you're good.
Just a quick overview. Flip over for the panel, please get the chairs up here. Okay. All right.
Looking this way, looking great, big smile, one, and one more, eyes open, one more, hold it, big smile, and last one.
And we have social media ones, okay, all right. We'll get the chairs
that's okay.
They should. We should.
Open book, open
Open
slide.
book, yes, open book, we can do
Then I
that.
can do it.
Open book, we can do
Yeah, open book, it doesn't matter.
that. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Lopez, for sharing. Now, I would like to remind the audience that we will have Q&A just after the fireside chat. So if you have a question, just write it down, hold on to it. We will get to that portion of the program in just a little while. Now, please allow us a couple of minutes while we set up for the fireside chat. Please stick around. Thank you.
For photography purposes, do we want to change the screen? Let's take it off. We all just,
All right, if I could once again get your attention, thank you for sticking around as we set up for the fireside chat now. Now I would like to introduce Erika Gonzalez, who is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and anchor at NBC4 Washington. She anchors NBC4 Midday and serves as the live desk and breaking news anchor for the station's evening newscasts and streaming channels. During the week, Gonzalez's For Your Home reports help viewers understand the real estate market while improving the look and feel of their homes. Gonzalez also serves as the editorial lead for a franchise on NBC4's sister station, Telemundo 44, with regular segment Bebe Tips, which supports the needs of parents with young children through access to premier specialists answering the most common questions. Gonzalez started her career in her native state of Texas, where she anchored newscasts on Kai TV and Telemundo Austin, as well as Rio TV in the Rio Grande Valley. She holds a degree in communications from the University of Texas Pan American, now known as University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley. And please help me in a warm welcome to Erika. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I can feel the head nods as Texas is mentioned. And I heard A&M maybe somewhere in the room, and I saw a couple of head bobs when Rio Grande Valley was mentioned.
You got someone in the front row here.
Excellent. It's good to be amongst some friends. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Erika Gonzalez. I'm with NBC4 and Telemundo 44. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. This type of information and conversation, I think, is helpful for all of us to not only understand sort of where we've come from, but where we are going as a society. It helps bolster our conversations, and it helps make room for us at the table. It is ground that we can stand on. So it's imperative that we understand these numbers because it is who we are in this country. There was a lot to digest between Anna and Mark's numbers. If anybody has one or two questions that maybe we can get to right now before we dive into a few more questions with Mark and Anna, I'm happy to take them now. We'll have somebody come around the room. You can quickly raise your hand. If not, we will just go ahead and jump right in. Anybody have one question that they want to get to right now based off of those numbers? Yes, okay, if we've got a microphone, just for the sake of audio, happy to come around to you. You can hold the mic. Please tell me your name and your question. Go ahead.
Does this work? Okay, perfect. Hi everyone, my name is Sofia Salvador. My question to you guys is, from all the statistics, what would you say is the most shocking to you and most impactful? I guess maybe those are two separate, or maybe it's the same answer.
Anna, would you like to go first?
Well, I mean, hello. Okay, hello.
There we go.
Okay, good. You know what? There's so many, not only from my, presentation, but also from Mark's, right? I would say that I would go back to 9 years ago when we presented our first report about the economics. Quite frankly, it was how productive we are, because we all know that, we do well, there's upward mobility in our community. Of course, there's this generational and nationality kind of, evolution. But I think the fact that we are the fourth largest economy in the world is just crazy. And I'm gonna be, this is Anna's comment, not LDC comment, but the gaslighting between what you see on the news and then, you know, that we're supposed to be, and then knowing that we're actually the 4th largest economy in the world, and that this country could have never become the leader country in the world without that part, right? And still today, we sustain that, not only demographically, which is very obvious, but also economically, in terms of workforce, in terms of innovation, in terms of college graduation, in terms of household formation, in terms of house buying. That for me is the most like determinant number, because that's why I'm so intentionally working on closing the gap between what the gaslighting is and the reality.
Mark?
It's a really great question. I would say that, while nothing was surprising, because we've been following these trends for a while, I would say that one thing that is emerging is how downbeat Latinos are at the moment. And they seem to be downbeat not only about the current situation of Latinos, but also even about their families in the future. We're working on another report that looks at how Latinos see the next generation and what financially they expect. But it does seem that while they remain more optimistic than other Americans, they're less optimistic than they used to be. And I think that's one of those findings that is showing how things are changing. So that would be my response to you.
Any other question in the audience? And then we'll dive in with a couple more. Yes, go right ahead.
Yes, I would love you to talk, because I've read a lot about not just the growth, but population growth currently for the next 20 years, what that percentage is. Also, what other, house loans, cars purchased, how much percentage is that growth? And then the second part of it is, there was a story the other day how Mexico now has a lower inflation rate than the United States. Is everything you're talking about having an impact? Is it pushing, by the efforts and what's going on, is it having an impact on suddenly Mexico has a better inflation rate than we do for the first time in history?
Let's talk a little bit about the demographic story of Latinos. Yes, Latinos have contributed more than half of US population growth since 2000. But things are changing. We're seeing a declining fertility rate. And if you were somebody who was a student of these population projections for Latinos back in the late 2000s, one of the things you might have heard was by 2050, Latinos will be 30% of the US population. Now we're saying by 2060, they'll be 25% or so. So there has been a shift because Latino fertility rates are declining. And even though we've had a recent increase in immigration from Latin America between 21 and 24, that too has slowed substantially in the last year. So the two big sources of population growth, which Latinos oftentimes were at higher levels than other groups of Americans, they are both changing. And so, yes, the demographic future of the country is Latino in many ways. We're also seeing a declining, for example, school enrollment in some parts of the country, as some places have seen an actual decline in the number of Hispanic students in schools. It used to be Latinos were the driver of school enrollments. That's kind of no longer the case.
And I don't want to take too much time because your question was so big, but I will give an example with the automotive industry. We work with some of those brands, and for brands like Hyundai and Toyota and some other, affordable cars, Latinos are 100% of their growth in cars sold. But the interesting thing is that this year we've gotten calls both from Mercedes-Benz and from BMW saying, we want to know more about you. And when we literally calls from the street, and when we ask why, they say because we're starting to see a lot of Latinos coming into the dealerships. And so I think that's reflected in every kind of industry. For me, that's an anecdote that really kind of translates into experiences.
Marianne, I want to pivot and ask you, because we're talking so much about these numbers, the example of Latinos going into dealerships. Before your time with CHLI, you spent much of your career in corporate marketing, advertising. When you see these types of numbers, when we talk about numbers like 3.4 trillion in purchasing power, 36 million eligible voters, what is it that corporate leaders need to be focusing on in order to make decisions that drive their companies forward?
So thank you. So there's a couple of things that I still even is a little bit of a shocker to me is that I remember being in corporate marketing and advertising when, there's like the psychographic demographic profile of the beer drinker when I was, in Coors, and then the hamburger buying demographic of the person, right? So what I find so fascinating is that we're used to use all of this data, and I could tell you in what city, when I was in Northern and Central California, where I was going to be able to sell the most Coors Light for Latinos, or the original Coors, or when I was at McDonald's, where that Big Mac is going to be sold, or where they're going to supersize the fries, right? Because we used all that data. We used it to narrow down what the advertising should be. Should it be an English commercial? Should it be a Spanish? Should we kind of mix it up a little bit because there were, this growing young Latino, bilingual, affluent, likes variety, but is also brand loyal, all these kinds of different things. And now I fast forward to what's going on and in my different hat here at CHLI, I'm kind of sad. I'm kind of sad that the people and the brands that were able to find me, or that I was able to use data to advertise, some of those brands aren't involved in civic engagement. And I also see what's kind of sad is that if you're able to go and buy something as a Latino, as a Hispanic, if you're able to go and buy something, we need you also to think about the passion in voting. We need you to vote. We don't need you to complain. I always tell people I appreciate the complaints, even in my own family, but the first thing I say is, okay, wait a minute. Before you complain, did you vote? Okay, right? Because that's true, like if you don't have a say, and Mark mentioned it, a lot of the numbers also, the other numbers that he didn't, amplify as much, but there's a lot of people that aren't voting. So when you don't go to show up to vote, and you have the opportunity and a huge opportunity in this country to vote, where other countries, you don't have that. And you don't exercise that, that means you're letting somebody else make a decision for you and your family. That's what that means. It doesn't mean, oh, I didn't like that guy. I didn't like that woman. Oh, I don't like what no. You're giving away your vote. So what's sad to me and shocking is when I was in corporate America, I used all these numbers to sell. It's the same information, same people, and now we can't get people, somehow there's a gap. There's a missing somewhere in this. And for me, working with young adults and in this space, my whole thing is register to vote and vote. If you live in an area where you can do an absentee ballot or you can vote early, go do that. And encourage your friends and your family to do that, because having a lot of Latinos, Hispanics, whatever country of origin, as Ana and Mark both mentioned, those look like awesome freaking numbers. But you know what, in this country, what's awesome is if you vote and you use that voice to vote. That's what's awesome in this country that we don't have in other places.
Mark, obviously, as you're looking at the research, the Latino population that existed 30 years ago is not the same one as it is today. Where are you seeing the biggest sort of shifts that are actually being overlooked?
I think one of the biggest shifts is intermarriage. And when you take a look at Latinos who are newlyweds, they marry, about 30% of them marry somebody who's not Latino. That's a higher intermarriage rate than among whites or blacks. It's about the same as Asian Americans. And why does this matter? Because the next generation of Latinos are going to be people with mixed heritage. In some ways, that perhaps is a strength, but it also means that the way we think about Latino identity today may shift in the future. What will people identify with? How will they identify? A couple of years ago, we did a report looking at not only people who self-identify as Latino, so people who say they're Hispanic, and that's how we traditionally capture the population. You have to say you're Hispanic in order to be counted as Hispanic. But there are many people who say they have a Hispanic ancestry but do not identify as Hispanic. Many of them are the children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of, at some point, somebody who was Hispanic married somebody who's not Hispanic. To give you some numbers on this, among immigrants, 90+%, almost 100% will say they're Hispanic if they have the ancestry. Among their children, also over 90%. Among those who are third generation like me, US born with US born parents, 75% of people with ancestry in that group will self-identify as Hispanic. But among the later generation, the fourth or higher generation, only half do. So I don't know what will happen in the future. I don't know how we will conceive of our identity, but this is one of those things that is changing that I think is not well understood. This is not a fixed identity. This is something that can change across generations.
I was so impacted also, anybody else, when Mark mentions about which Hispanics would say that their ethnicity or sharing their background actually helps them versus hurts them, and politically, what side that falls on, depending on red or blue, how they also identify politically.
Yeah, this is one of the findings that I think is an important finding from the report that we released last week. When it comes to identity, there's a lot of diversity in the ways in which Latinos identify themselves, and our report shows that that extends to politics as well. If you were to look at the Latinos who say that they voted for Donald Trump in 2024, they're more likely to say that they see themselves as American most often, and those who voted for Harris are more likely to say one of the country of origin terms is what they use most often. Also, interestingly, many of those who are Republican will say that their Hispanic identity neither matters or neither helps nor hurts, but many of those who are Democrats will say that actually it hurts more than helps. But I want to stress that there is a diversity of views here, again, reflecting the diversity of the population. And I don't know if those numbers would shift if we had a different composition in Congress and in the White House.
Anna, let me ask you, we have these numbers, and I know you say, okay, we talk to all different people, we help all different people understand and groups understand these numbers. If you were advising a government relations team on these numbers to either help or hurt a situation, what is it that they need to know about this? Like, okay, we have these numbers, and now what? What do they do with it?
But can I start by elaborating a little bit more on what Mark was saying? So we just we recently finished a report with Kantar, the largest consumer product company in the world, research company in the world, and we were exploring what young Latinos, believe, and then also women. We just finished another one with women, Latinas. And we saw exactly what Mark was saying. They felt that specifically, and I think you agree with me, on 2025, the situation got really dramatic. They felt like, being Latino, made them targets in some ways. Mm-hmm. But we went further because we had the luck of being able to have these panels and these focus groups for like 6 months. And we went further and we said, okay, but how does that feel? And they said two things, which I found really interesting. One was, yes, I feel like I've been targeted in some ways, but that's not going to stop me. So we are going to get through this, and I'm still going to buy what I want. I still want to make decisions. And more importantly, and specifically with young people, saying, I will remember, because this will finish, right? I mean, this is something that comes from, and this is just a fact, I don't want to be partisan, but from this administration, right? There are policies within corporations, there are, changes in public policy, et cetera, that have happened in 2025, and this will also finish. And we will remember. And you see brands that are actually acting exactly the opposite of what most brands are doing. Example that is very public is Costco, and their sales have gone to the roof, right? The Latino consumer is noticing, and it is remembering, and it is rewarding. A little bit of what Marianne was saying with voting, it's happening with brands. I mean, when you're saying the way you can express yourself and the way you can demand what you want, it's also the power of your purse, not only the power of your vote, but the power of your purse, the power of your choices, the power of informing yourself on what you're gonna buy, right? There was, in one of our panels, we had an underserved boy that was going to college, full ride, brilliant kid, first kid in his family. And somebody asked him, the interviewer asked him, what are you ready? It was August, are you ready to go? And he said, yes, the only thing I have to do is get my computer. And he said, what computer are you buying? And he said, Apple. And the interviewer, knowing his background, said, why Apple? It's so much more expensive than any of your options, right? And he said, because, and this is an underserved kid, okay? He said, because I did my research, and Apple has
a board member that is a Latina and has 2 C-suite Latinos. And I'm gonna support it because I will need to support those kind of brands. And so, yes, we are going through horrible things. I mean, like, let's face it, I travel with my passport every day, right? But we also know that we'll keep going, and I think that's important for brands. When you say, my advice is be aware that these things will pass, and that you need to build still now a trail of support to this community if you want these dollars into your account, you know, in the future.
Marianne, Chile is coming up on a big anniversary, 20 years, heard of that?
Yeah, so we just had our 20th anniversary, and it's interesting because I haven't been with Chile for 20 years, although it kind of does feel like it a little bit here, but it'll be 15 next month. And as I look across, you know, those different years and looking at some of the research that they have as well, it's funny how I'm thinking about what Anna's saying, like, you know, we have different ways of voting, right? We have voting with our cash, right? And then we also vote, you know, at the ballot, basically, the ballot box. And it is really interesting because as Hispanics, Latinos, we kind of don't match up in that. And so what we're really trying to do at Chile, and we have, you know, over the years, is really bring this kind of information forward, right? That the whole diversity of thought, we're not all the same, we don't all vote the same, we don't have the same countries of origin. I very much, in a lot of presentations, will use the example that my dad came from Mexico in 1952 in the Bracero program, because the US basically went and knocked on the door of Mexico and said, hey, we need some of you guys to come over and help us. So Dad answered and came over, right? And every time he went back to Mexico and came back to the US, he brought another brother, because he had 4 brothers, you know? But that idea was different. Dad came for an economic opportunity to make money, and the idea was to go back to Mexico. It took a long time. Finally, in high school, I'm telling my dad, Daddy, you have to be a naturalized citizen. I hate to break the news to you, but we're not going back to El Cuito, El Canque, and Michoacan. Okay, like, we're all here, you have 5 kids, you know, we need to start getting involved here. This is gonna be home. And he didn't want to do that because he felt that he was betraying Mexico, right? But then he realized, well, no, wait a minute, I do have to. And so there's different levels of immigration, migration, you know, different people come in from different countries for different reasons. And I share that because my husband on the far left over there off the stage was born in Cuba, right? So he came to the US just like our chairwoman. Can you imagine leaving your country because you voted for somebody that you thought was gonna help you? You find out they don't, and you literally leave your country with 1 suitcase. That's it, with 1 suitcase. I don't even travel with 1 suitcase right now, okay? So it's all very different. And so I think that's the really tough part, but it's also the fun part of Chile, is seeing the variety, the diversity of people, and that we all are very different. But one thing at the end of the day that's gonna make a difference is the 2 things that Ana mentioned. Where do you spend your money? Learn where you should spend your money. And 2, are you voting? Because when we start voting more, just as much as we're spending, we're going to be having different conversations.
So clearly, I mean, we've had all these numbers reflect, you know, the big pie is that this is a huge group of people that are driving the economy, and still about 1/3 say that identifying themselves as Hispanics or Latinos holds them back. I'm going to ask each of you, we can go down the line, what would it take for people to feel like we've closed that gap?
Dun, dun, dun.
I know.
Well, I think, you know, it's a little bit of the mission of the Latino Donor Collaborative, which is to create a fact-based image of who Latinos are. We don't need charity. We don't need a relaunch of our brand. We just need to be identified for who we are. And that's why we provide the numbers, because we already have access. We already should have access. We earned it already, our parents, well, I'm a parent, but you know, your parents earned it.
Mark?
That's a really great question, and I think that looking at some of the reasons that people might give for why they feel they're being held back, partly that's experiences with discrimination. Partly that's about limited economic opportunity, feeling like no matter how hard you work, you're just not gonna make it. I wanna stress that these are not uniquely Latino stories. They are things that are happening to many Americans. You might hear a lot about young people generally saying that no matter how hard they work, they feel like they just can't get ahead. That's partly about inflation, it's partly about feeling like their work is not being recognized, etc. So when it comes to their identity perhaps being a challenge in achieving what they want to achieve in life, it may be tied to some of those things. How we change that? That's a tougher question. I don't know if I have an answer for that. But those are the things I think that many people would point to as the challenges they're facing in their lives.
I appreciate the honesty in that, Marianne.
I really appreciate this question because I think part of it is an opportunity for all of us here in this room. And I usually say that in terms of our briefings, right? We have the blessing of being here in this room, Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., whether you're here as an intern full-time, whatever, right? We're here. We have the opportunity to do that, and we're having some people listen in. Is that it's an opportunity to be able to sit at a table with people who are not Latino. Because when you sit at different tables and you have different conversations and you initiate a different conversation or you talk about your experiences, and everybody's experience is valuable. No one's is better or worse than somebody else. But when you start to kind of share and have these conversations, then everybody's kind of like, you know, Mark's not that different than me, you know, or Bruce over there's not that much different. We shared blah, blah, blah. And so I think that the more that we have conversations, the more that we become, it's hard to other someone when you've been with others, right? So as long as we can other others, we're always gonna have that challenge. But the minute we're like, you know, I'm gonna be another. I've always been somebody's others. I tell people, look, I'm in corporate America, I was the Latina. I was the Hispanic. I was the only Hispanic marketing person on a team for a while, right? Or I'm the only one with a degree, or I'm the only one who grew up in a farm worker camp. God knows we all have lots of labels. But when we just kind of sit and actually be intentional about having conversations, then guess what? There's nobody else left to other anymore because we've already been past that.
And you can, Pastor says, you can disagree without being disagreeable. I've heard in church lately. I thought, I'm going to hold on to that. That's well said. You can disagree with somebody without being disagreeable.
And not everything has to be so personal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like it doesn't have to be so personal. So my kind of call to action, my hope is that, and I know hope is not a plan and hope is not a strategy, but I'm hopeful that you take the time to sit down in a different table with somebody that you don't already know while you're here. Because that's how you grow.
Yeah.
And when you run for office, okay, then you're gonna have different perspectives. You're not gonna just have the one from your mom and dad. You're not gonna have one just from your professor. You're not gonna have one perspective from an employer. You're gonna have a variety of perspectives, and that's gonna make you a stronger representative for your community.
All said. I'm trying to keep us honest with our time here, so I'm going to turn it back over to you all in the audience. We started off with a couple of questions. I'd like to turn it back over to you. If you have a question, please raise your hand. For the sake of audio, we'll come around you, put a mic in front of you, and then you can ask your question to our panelists. I believe this is our Aggie right here in the front, correct? All right, welcome. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Sebastian Steak Duarte. I'm from Texas A&M. A question about having to do with the, not to get political, with the RNC and the DNC. Both are committees that are trying to, I guess, like get people elected into office. What do you think it will take for them to acknowledge these statistics? And what do you think they're missing to acknowledge the statistics for people that look like us to run for office?
Good question.
I mean,
Anna, go ahead.
So I think they need to know these numbers, purely the democratic, like the demographic ones. I mean, when you talk about 27% of youth, 94% vote with the possibility of voting because they were born here. I mean, honestly, I think they just need to understand the numbers. And to be honest with you, the party that won in 2024 understood them in terms of, that's why they won. And I'm not being partisan here in any way, and for those who know me personally, know that I'm not being partisan. Because, you know, I may agree or not disagree with what happened, but they knew it, and they targeted it, and they used them. And I think that should be a lesson for everybody.
Mark?
It's a really great question, and again, I want to emphasize nonpartisan, non-advocacy, so I can't make any recommendations. But one
Mark
of the
would
things,
say, but the research would show, right?
I was going to say, but some surveys have shown. Thank you for Erica. Some surveys have shown from Pew Research and elsewhere that attitudes about both of the parties among Latinos are declining. So Latinos are less likely to say that the parties are representing them or that they feel aligned with the parties. That is an important message that perhaps party leaders might find valuable. And I'm sure that they have heard this because they do their own polling and it's something that's regularly a part of their story. I also think, though, that one of the things when it comes to Latinos and voters is to not take Latino voters for granted. You probably have heard a lot of this story. Many researchers have pointed to that maybe some parties, whether it was a Republican Party in the mid-2010s, maybe it was a Democratic Party in 2020 and 2024, have taken Latino voters' support for granted. If anything, one of the things I think that's happened is that we actually don't quite always know which way Latino voters are going to go. And if anything, the last couple of elections have put a greater emphasis that if you want to win an election, you need to pay attention to Latino voters because we don't know which way they're going to go, or they might go just enough in one way to make a difference nationally. That's really interesting in many ways. And so my answer to you is I think both parties have a challenge with their image among Latinos. That's what polling from us and polling from other organizations say. And we'll see where the parties go as they think about this upcoming election and 2028.
And I think that the lesson of what Mark said, we are the swing vote, and we should use that.
Yeah, I also wanted to encourage you that, so on the CHLI board, we have Republicans and Democrats. And so we have an opportunity to work across, the aisle all the time. And one of the things that's really interesting is that it's not just that the RNC, DNC at the higher level, we need to look at your vote is at the local level, right? So when you go to vote, the majority of what's on the ballot is what's local issues. The majority of it is the council, the county, depending on your state or your county, some have judges, some have sheriffs, some don't. It varies, right? The majority on the ballot is for your local issues, your local representatives on local things that are gonna happen to you more on a regular basis, weekly basis, right? The vote for a president is every 4 years, and it will trickle down at some point, some things faster than others. Some things don't happen until years later, even though they got voted on now, right? So it's just really different. So I think the focus is really more on figure out who is the member of Congress or your congressional district and really focus in on what the demographics are in that district. So for example, right now with some states doing some redistricting, there's a lot of people reevaluating numbers because they lost some voters or they maybe gained some voters depending on their district. And just because one party led a redistricting, quote unquote, that doesn't mean the votes are gonna necessarily go that way. Because you have to get to know a whole group of new people that you didn't even know, and now they're your constituents, right? And then the constituents are doing the same thing. They're like, oh my God, who is this candidate? Or who is this person? Because I've been so used to voting for somebody else. Now I gotta learn about these 2 new or 3 or 4 new candidates. So it is a lot of learning. I think part of it is that in order to kind of, I know people kind of look at the bigger campaigns sometimes because it's easier, but really what you wanna focus on is looking more at the local level. Like if you're interning here, you need to go back home and you need to work on a campaign. You need to work on a party, on a candidate. You need to learn how it works at different levels, and working on a campaign is an awesome way to learn that and a different kind of way to also contribute and give back. I didn't do that, but my husband did, other people in this room have, and I know you not only learn a lot, but you make an extraordinary relationships and connections that'll last you for a lifetime.
And also, as your local news anchor, I would be remiss if I did not say about the importance of local, right? The elections once every 4 years versus in Washington DC, for instance, we use this closest example that we had with the council, right? We had basically 4 new seats in this last election, a representative to Congress, a new mayor, all of these things. So the biggest change that you'll see, how well or not your trash is being picked up, whether or not you get a data center in your backyard, what that community center turns into, that is what's happening in your community versus the big picture that you vote in once every 4 years. So it is so important to be engaged locally, in your community, in your local races. Big pie in the sky, absolutely, but do not lose sight of the local races. That's really where the rubber meets the road in your community. Another question very quickly before I hand things over. Can we take another question from the audience?
A bit of a comment. So we
Bruce?
just had a podcast for CHLI Podcast, and we were talking about Marco Rubio, and he worked on campaigns before he got elected himself. And so you look at somebody who is so successful now. He started his career at the bottom, knocking doors.
He started as an intern working for the Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen over here.
Well, that's not so bad. But to your point, that's how he started his career, and he's done so well. Anyway, something to consider.
Just incredible to think of where time and where places will lead you. Anybody else? If not, I will hand things back over to Nicole. Yeah, one more question back over here. Yes, go right ahead.
Hi, Sofia Salvador again. Thank you guys for being here. Really enjoyed all of your opinions. I have a question specifically. So, for context, I am a Miami Latina. I'm Bolivian. Yes. And so I'm very curious on whether you've noticed specific divides within the Latino community, the Mexican community in comparison to the Cuban and Venezuelans that make up a big population in Miami specifically. Also, you know, Miami Latinos versus LA Latinos, very different, and also the different, like, I guess the word would be economic standing or social mobility. I went to Florida International University, which is, yes, pause up! And I'm very proud to say we are known for the social mobility that we provide to our Miami and very strong Latino community. So I'm curious what you guys have each noticed in that divide, or if you would say it's completely different. I know specifically in Miami, the Cubans, Venezuelans, is very different to, you know, like my family, so I'm curious your thoughts.
Where did you grow up? Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Boston, because my family lived by like Maryland and also Massachusetts Northeast, but my sister's here with me, and we grew up more in Miami, so Doral area, very Venezuelan, very close to Hialeah with the Cubans as well, so I almost have the Venezuelan accent, Colombian accent.
I love it. So you've hinted at something that I think is really important to get at, which is the great diversity there is among this population of 68 million plus people. That is along a number of dimensions, but one of them which is across origin groups. It's interesting, about almost 70% of the nation's Cuban population is in Florida, so it's a very, very concentrated population. The Mexican-American population, by comparison, is dispersed across the country. In fact, oftentimes it's the largest origin group everywhere except on the East Coast, which is where, only in Georgia are they the largest, but every other state it is another origin group. But it only goes to show you that there's a lot of diversity. Here are some of the ways we've noticed diversity. Texas. So when you talk about Texas, you asked about identity a little earlier. Many years ago, we did a survey where we had state level information to be able to talk about identity. At the time, we found that Texans are more likely to say they prefer the term Hispanic, not Latino, not something else, Hispanic as the term to describe their pan-ethnic identity. Mexican American as well. And yet they're mostly of Mexican origin. You go to California, it's very different. They're going to say Chicano, they're going to say other things rather than Mexican American. And I say this because I remember when one of my good friends from grad school, I called him a Chicano and he's from Texas. He went to Texas A&M and he made a point to tell me I'm Hispanic and I'm Mexican American. So you ask about divides, those are some of the divides. There are also other divides within the population. We find, for example, on language, that a lot of people who grew up speaking English are ashamed for not speaking Spanish. What about skin color? Turns out darker skinned Latinos experience just as much discrimination from other Latinos as they do from non-Latinos. So there's another division. And then when it comes to politics, not every Latino is a Democrat, not every Latino is a Republican. And while some communities may be more leaning towards the Republican Party, like you said, in South Florida, both Cuban and Venezuelan populations have had a reputation for being more likely to be Republican than other groups of Latinos. In the American Southwest, though, Mexican Americans differ according to immigrant generation. Immigrants and their children tend to be more Democrat. Third and higher tend to be more, not necessarily majority Republican, but lean more Republican than other groups of Mexican Americans. And then it depends on the state. So you're right to say that there's a tremendous amount of diversity on a number of dimensions, but it's about identity, it's about politics, it's about economics, all those things. There isn't a single Latino story.
And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but the more assimilated and therefore the further from the immigrant parent, the more that where the origin of country of origin doesn't really affect. So we're seeing right now that blend of second, third, and fourth generation.
That's exactly right. You saw it in some of our data. Yeah. I would say, though, that many people who are self-identifying as Hispanic or Latino still express their identity sometimes in their origin. So they'll say that they are of Mexican origin or Mexican background, even if they most often call themselves something else. They don't say I'm Mexican most often, they'll say I'm American most often. Mm-hmm. They still acknowledge that family heritage and background. And I think also that's another part of the story, how diverse our own backgrounds are, that actually there are multiple stories we might tell about ourselves, both in the United States and in the countries of origin where our families are from.
Marianne, I'll give you final thoughts here before I hand it back over to Nicole.
So Sophia, right? So Sophia, I encourage you to.
It's okay.
Okay? Yeah. So I encourage you to keep asking that question as you go in your career and as you interact with other people that maybe you're not familiar with as well. Look, I grew up in a farm worker camp in Central California. The eldest of 5, gracias a Dios, all of us have a college education. And I came to the Washington, D.C. for a job, and then I married a Cuban. Okay, so like you just never know, right? So I've learned from those different experiences, right? But even within families, you have differences, right? So as the eldest of 5 immigrants, who dad only finished 3rd grade in Mexico, mom only finished 3rd grade in Texas. So try asking them for permission to go to a high school dance. It didn't really go well, right? Because they didn't understand it, right? So there's a lot of educating and different, so it also depends on when people came to the country, what their level of education is, if they spoke English, if they don't. I have nephews that can't answer a complete sentence in Spanish, and I have our godson that's almost trilingual, right? So you just never know. So I think that hopefully you've also learned, and everybody else, how to be a good ambassador, that we're not all the same, we don't all vote the same, and it's an opportunity to share your story just as much as to listen to somebody else's story.
I'll also share, just to piggyback off of Marianne, a funny story about my husband and I. When I took him home to meet my family, I'm Mexican American, my husband is Puerto Rican. I took him home. I'd never dated a Puerto Rican before, let alone about to put a ring on my finger. And my mom asks my father, pues, ¿cómo ves? Like, ¿cómo ves? And I'm like, mira, habla español, baila, y ama al Señor, y de a mí ya no me pueden pedir más. Of those 3 things, he loves Jesus, he dances, and he speaks Spanish. Of this Mexican American, you can ask no more. So, so a lot of this is similar stories about how we're all interwoven, and a lot of we have to find the similarities and be kinder to ourselves, right? Within our groups and our populations. What a wonderful conversation we've had the chance to have with you today. Thank you for your questions. We'll turn it back over to Nicole, who will help end our program. Want to give you some time to grab a little cafecito and engage amongst yourselves. But my name is Erica Gonzalez. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you to Chili, to Mark, Anna. Thank you very much. Anna, Mark, Marianne, thank you so much. This was amazing. I loved to be able to learn more about trends that are influencing our community currently, and I look forward to continuing to learn from both your organizations and what research you are conducting.
catch up here on the script. We are live, people. These things happen. All right. Well, once again, thank you so much to you all for joining us today. I hope that as we discussed during the panel, your main takeaway is that the Hispanic community is very diverse. We don't all think the same. We don't all look the same. We don't have the same stories. And, you know, that impacts how we vote and what we consume and when. And, you know, I hope you just take that home with you and continue to consider that as you move forward in your careers. Thanks again for joining us at today's program. This concludes Chili's Hispanic Constituent Forum. Please join us again on September 15 for our next rendition of Chili's Public Policy Briefing Series and a conversation on Cuba. As Erika said, enjoy some cafecito, have some final conversations, and please enjoy the rest of today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.